bigger guns, angrier rants, same Zach. Guys, it's Paul, and today we are checking out Zach's Gun Rants Part 3, Triple Threat. Let's get into it.
Zach,
Yes?
why are we here at the Gun Runners?
Because I got a bunch of gold bars I gotta spend on stuff.
Well, I thought we were hoarding those. We agreed to never spend them.
Mike, there's no reason to be miserly. We can spread the wealth around.
They're gonna give that...
We were gonna hold on to them as a memento of our various adventures.
Oh, that's the Jeff Bezos mentality. Yeah, I think for the ultra-rich people of the world, so at some point, you make so much money that you can't reasonably spend it in a lifetime, right? Not on any of the things that you would ever even tangentially encounter. And yet some of those people continue to accrue money. Now, okay, this is complicated. If you're Jeff Bezos and you're worth a gazillion trillion dollars, well, some of that worth is in Amazon stock. And actually, gold operates the same way. Let's say I had a third of the world's gold supply, and the price of gold is, I don't know, we'll round it. We'll say $2,000 an ounce. Well, I would be worth, right, 2,000 times the number of ounces of gold I have, $1 trillion. But the problem is, let's say I said, you know what? I want to hold that money in my hand. I want that trillion US dollars. Well, to do that, I would have to sell all my gold. But what happens if I own so much gold that I can start to screw with the market? And what would happen if word got out that old rich Paul was selling his gold? Well, the answer is the price of gold would plummet, right? And by the time I was selling my last bars of gold, I wouldn't be able to give it away. And what would I be worth? Well, I'd be worth something, but I wouldn't be worth the $1 trillion that you initially might have thought. And that's because I have deflated the market. And so that's how it is for Elon Musk and Tesla. That's how it is for Jeff Bezos. They have these net worths on paper, and they can access them through a different mechanism. What they will do is actually say, if I were, again, I'll use Trillionaire Gold Paul, for example. Trillionaire Gold Paul shouldn't sell his gold because he'll crash the gold market, dropping my net worth to basically, not zero, but my net worth will be a tenth of what its estimate is. Instead, I can go to a bank and be like, hey, bank, I would like to take out a loan, sort of like how you can take out a loan against your house. You can say, hey, I'd like to take out a loan against my house, i.e. using my house as collateral. Well, in my case, instead of a house, I'm going to say, hey, bank, would you like to give me a loan against my giant pile of gold? The bank says, of course we would. We would be happy to give you a loan backed by a concrete asset like your gold. So they give me a loan for, let's say, $500 million. So now I have pocket money I can spend as though I sold my gold, but I haven't actually dropped the market. This is sort of how these ultra wealthy people whose wealth comes from business ownership are able to convert their wealth into, houses and security details and questionable space programs without actually having to liquidate their wealth generating, in Bezos' case or Musk's case, shares of their company.
I will always hold our adventures near and dear to my heart. And these gold bars are heavy and they're starting to hurt my back. 9mm pistol, 9mm submachine gun, anti-material rifle, assault carbine. Yeah, that's your typical cowboy revolver. Now, a normal person, someone that is not as well trained in firearms as me, would not be able to reload this as quickly as I can. Yeah.
Too bad there was no speed loader for it.
So, this gun is based on the Colt Single Action Army.
If you guys are fans of Metal Gear Solid, you know that the Colt Single Action Army is the iconic weapon of the one and only villain, Revolver Ocelot.
Firing at that wall is gonna cause a ricochet. Someone's gonna get hurt here. Boy, your thumb must get sore.
Yeah, it does get really sore. Reloading it that quickly is something that would take a lot of practice. It's a really old design, been around for quite a long time.
Colt is a very reliable name.
Well, I mean, they were, but we're not going to get into that right now.
Oh, this is one of the problems, guys, with companies and brands, is that they are always being sold and liquidated and traded. So even brands that were reliable 10 years ago, right, may be owned by a totally different company. I believe Craftsman Tools, Craftsman's used to be the gold standard in commercial and personal use tools. Their wrenches were ironclad, literally, diamond clad, in fact. But after a few acquisitions, right, Sears got into some hard times, sold the brand off. Now Craftsman Tools are considered just basically another Amazon brand of tool. They're as likely to break as they are to work on the thing that you're trying to do with them.
Okay.
Firearms are the same way, right? Colt is now owned by FN, I think.
They did actually make this a single action, which is interesting. Every time you fire it, you pull the hammer back, because that's how this gun would actually work, you know?
What would it be if it wasn't single action?
It would be double action.
You have to pull the hammer back every time you want to fire a bullet.
Yep, that is true.
Seems like that's also going to get tiring on your thumb.
Not really. It's not too heavy.
For all the shooting we do, maybe.
One of the fun things about these is that they don't have a disconnector on the hammer, which basically means that if you just hold down the trigger and pull back the hammer and let go of it, it will just fire. So that means you can do like in the old cowboy movies where you can fan the hammer and just hold down the trigger and just go pow, 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 pow.
Oh, I love how they integrated the character doing it. I actually really like this format because it can be pretty tough to actually create firearm content on YouTube. And while some of the firearm content is dumb and cringy and trash, some of it is actually really good information for people who own or want to purchase a firearm. And this sort of is a great workaround in that it's a game that's mostly pretty realistic and can take you through on a primer of firearms.
And fire like 6 rounds one after another.
Why don't you do that?
I haven't practiced doing that, and I don't want the recoil to jam the hammer into the back of my left hand.
It would hurt the palm of your hand, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
it's already so damaged from Mario Party.
It's...
Oh, man.
I hadn't even thought about that. My God. Remember how they used to sell the gloves for Mario Party so that you could do the thing where you had to spin the analog stick around?
I am aware.
Oh, man.
Okay, guys. Oh, wait. Maybe they're going to talk about it and save me
let's discuss the
telling
Nintendo
you
64 shitty controllers.
Yes, indeed.
Hey, you know how you had 3 arms for each prong? What, you didn't? Oh, okay. You'd use the middle prong and the right prong, and then 3 years later you'd find a game that would use the D-pad, so you'd use the left prong, but the D-pad had gotten all crusty from disuse.
Yeah, man, that would happen a lot.
Why did they fall out of disuse? It's because...
Okay, so here's what he's talking about with Mario Party. Guys, the original Mario Party was made for the Nintendo 64. This was something that came out when I was 8 or 9, and it was a game changer system because up until that point, there hadn't really been games that took place, Nintendo games, I should say, that took place in a 3D universe. Some games like Resident Evil for the PlayStation were starting to experiment with the 3D world, but remember, before the Nintendo 64, there had just been the Super Nintendo system. And so you would have a lot of side scrollers and things that looked a little like Pokemon, right? The above looking down on the 2D world. But the Nintendo 64 was a proper 3D environment, and it was rendered in 3D. Which meant there was even a camera panning you could do, but the controller was really bizarrely laid out. There was a central joystick, a 4-button axis, there were 2 left and right tabs, and then there was a trigger button under the controller. But there was also a D-pad that was pretty underutilized. It was a fascinating controller design and really kind of leapt forward the ways of thinking about gaming and people's interactions with games. But Mario Party was awesome because it was designed to always be a game played with multiple people, but instead of, there was obviously the meta game, which was sort of like a board game where your players moved around the board, but within that, there were mini games you would play, often that were simple tests of timing or tests of rapid button pushing. But one of the things that was interesting is some of the games gauged your ability to rotate the controller more or faster than your opponent, say to raise or lower a bridge. And so your thumb could only rotate so fast, but what every child found was that you could rotate faster if you used your palm in a sort of washing motion. So you would place this D-pad, this joystick, right on your thumb, right on the palm of your hand. And then when the game was on, you would frantically, as fast as you could, try to get the most rotations in. But the result, when you're a kid, you don't realize that speed and pressing hard are actually sort of opposites, right? You just think rotating hard is the same thing as pushing hard. And so people would actually get blisters and tear up the skin on their hands. My brother did it. I did it in order to win these contests of rotation. I mean, obviously, when it's your siblings, you have to beat them no matter what.
No, that's not double action.
That's part of it.
That said, Mario Party 64, so close to my heart.
And also just because of how long it took to reload this.
I can see how that would be an issue.
Yeah, it does take a while to reload it. And it's a design that's from the early 1800s. It's not going to last forever. New guns came out.
It might be slower than a semi-auto rifle.
I mean, it's still much more effective. I think it was actually the late 1800s because I believe the Colt Single Action Army was popularized post-Civil War. It was seen as a cowboy gun. The Civil War era revolvers were cap and ball and did not use a self-contained cartridge. So you would have to literally take out that cylinder, load individual bits of gunpowder, load a primer, load a ball, and then put it in. It was called a cap and ball revolver.
Rifle, but hey, it's still faster than a blunderbuss.
It's faster than...
Until this was created, repeating guns were a thing, but not really. This was like the first viable repeating firearm.
So just like the Nintendo 64, it was good for its time, but technology has surpassed it.
There are still people that will tell you about how great a single-action revolver is, and to be fair, they're still very good guns.
Yeah, the same people that like Bomberman 64.
Hey, Bomberman 64 is a classic.
Yeah.
The multiplayer was fun.
Next gun. The 44 Magnum revolver. I believe it's based on a Smith & Wesson Model 19.
You can't fool me. That's the exact same gun.
No, it's different. See, this one's double action. You don't have to pull the hammer back on it every time, but you can.
I guess, if you wanted to make your thumb sore.
Oh,
holding the gun sideways. Gonna be styling.
Yeah, I'm leaning around cover to shoot.
Advanced.
Okay, I love how he shoots and the gun does this. Okay, the weapon, you may experience some instability after firing a weapon, but the weapon itself is only going to send the recoil straight back, or the barrel is going to rise as you shoot.
Yeah. Eject the rounds out of it and put new rounds in.
Hooray! It can be speed loaded, sped load.
How's that for futuristic? It was invented by a guy that was known for designing just weird Wildcat cartridges. He basically just kept taking like 44-40 Smith & Wesson, 45 Colt, and he just kept taking those and just trying to pack more powder into it and making them more powerful.
Oh God.
He kept pestering Smith & Wesson and saying, I'm making these cartridges that are really powerful. Can you guys, make me a frame that can actually handle this? He just kept pestering Smith & Wesson over and over and over until eventually Smith & Wesson was like, fine, if it'll get you to shut up, here, it's a K-frame revolver. Have fun, buddy.
There you go.
So
my bullets are too strong. Your gun is too weak.
I need more power.
I don't want to use your baby gun.
44 Magnum was just created by a guy that wouldn't stop pestering Smith & Wesson until
That's awesome.
they made him a gun in the caliber he wanted.
Hooray, now I can go squirrel shooting.
For the longest time, 44 Magnum was the most powerful Magnum cartridge that you could buy.
Because 50 cal hadn't been designed yet.
Well, not in revolvers anyway.
No, that would come later, the 50 cal revolvers.
Yeah, that would come later.
Yeah, I mean, so this is one of the things that people forget a lot is that there's also a material science component to firearm manufacture. And remember, you're creating a tiny explosion inside that weapon every time you fire it. So the material has to be capable of standing up to that explosion. There was a good Mythbusters episode that kind of illustrates this, where they attempted to make a cannon out of wood. And basically, no matter how thick the wood was, it was always going to explode when faced with a chemical powder explosion of any magnitude. And obviously metal is much stronger, but all metals are not created equal. Different alloys, different tempers, different manufacturing, different purity, all of these things impact whether or how much use and abuse a piece of metal can stand up to. So as you refine and create more powerful metals, you can get more powerful cartridges loaded into them.
The ones that break your arm?
They don't break your arm, but they're definitely not pleasant to shoot. We've moved from a single action revolver to a single and double action revolver. So this one, you can either fire it by just pulling the trigger, and then the hammer moves backwards and then forwards, or you can fire it by pulling the hammer back and then firing it. I can't do that on this one for reasons that I refuse to explain to you.
Yeah, certainly not technological limitations of the game.
Yeah, certainly not that. I just don't feel like doing it.
I mean, it's funny because they already animated someone thumbing back a hammer in the Colt single action army.
Behold the 10mm pistol!
This is a standard Fallout weapon, right?
Yeah, I think everybody is familiar with that weapon.
Anyone that has played this game for 5 minutes is aware of what the 10mm pistol is.
Yes, it's given to you by the good doctor, which you shouldn't do because you're not supposed to just give away guns.
You're not supposed to do that. And also, he's a doctor. Ever heard of the Hippocratic Oath? Do no harm.
He's protecting his patient from harm. Maybe. Guys, one of the things that's actually pretty controversial in the US is that there is a lot of legal prohibitions on funding research into the danger that firearms pose. I'm here to tell you, and I am someone who owns firearms, the #1 person most likely to be shot by a firearm is its owner. It just facilitates self-harm on a population level better than any other thing you can own. But the CDC are prohibited from engaging in research. In a lot of states, doctors aren't even allowed to ask someone who expresses a desire to hurt themselves or others. They aren't even allowed to ask if they have firearms in the home. It's a pretty strange and draconian loophole. I am, of course, all for Americans' right to own firearms, but, well, responsible Americans. But you have to be able to stop people from hurting each other, right? I know this isn't a political channel, but you've got to admit, if someone says they're going to hurt themselves or someone else, you should be able to at least ask if they have firearms in the home.
Just gave a guy a gun.
Lots of ways to save lives. Sometimes heal patients, sometimes kill bad guys.
That is why medics have pistols, that is to defend their patients.
10mm pistol is made of like a weird combination of several different guns. The slide is kind of based on the Desert Eagle.
Oh yeah, I see it.
Look, it reminds me of a USP.
A little bit. It's kind of got that to it.
Just because of that flashlight underneath the barrel.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, which this isn't a flashlight. It's like part of the gun. I don't fully understand it.
So they just wanted a gun that's a little top heavy, I guess?
They wanted it to be chunky for some reason. It's in 10mm. The calibers in this game are a little weird. They don't like fully make sense. And also the shell casings that come out of this gun are absolutely gigantic. I mean, it looks like a grenade shell casing is coming out of there when I shoot it. Look how big that thing is.
That's true.
It's like the size of my dang finger.
Maybe this is just like bolter rounds in Warhammer 40k, short, stubby, and loaded with powder. I would be really curious to know if there is an optimal length for the actual cartridge itself. If a longer cartridge confers some sort of additional ability that a short, squat cartridge wouldn't. Again, it's tough to know, right? A lot of times when we design things like bullets, people copy what already exists. And so if there were in a different timeline, right, maybe bullets would be not super squat and short, but shorter and squatter than they currently are.
By the way, thanks.
But there is definitely, sort of like a rocket ship, a ratio between propellant and payload, right? The rocket payload is like very small, and then the rest of a typical rocket ship is all propellant basically, and it burns through that propellant and then discharges it. And a bullet, you notice, is basically structured the same way because it is the same. You have the actual payload, the round itself, and then the rest of the bullet is just propellant.
Thank you for spraying me with all this brass.
You're welcome. 10mm
10mm is not a common caliber.
In real life, it is. It's decently common in real life.
Is it? I feel like I hear a lot about 9mm, but not a lot about 10mm.
It's not as common as 9mm, but it's still common. There's a lot of guns that are chambered in 10mm.
Yeah? Anything popularized by modern culture?
I mean, there's Glocks that are in 10mm. The Bren 10 is a 10mm handgun.
Makes sense.
Smith & Wesson has made several guns in 10mm. There's quite a few guns that are in 10mm. It's very popular as a hunting or defense cartridge against bears.
I know it's bigger than 9mm, but that doesn't mean it's good against bears.
No, it is.
Is it?
Yeah, 10mm is actually a decent cartridge against bears. There's a lot of brush pilots in Alaska that carry a 10mm.
But not 9mm because it's too weak? It's only a 1mm difference.
Yeah, but the cartridge itself is smaller.
Well, you're not firing the cartridge.
No, but the cartridge of 10mm has a lot more powder behind.
Right, so this is the thing to remember. A 10mm is not a 10mm. For example, there is US 9mm, 9x19, and then there is Soviet 9mm, which is 9x18. And the differences sound tiny, but if you look at the cartridges, there's almost no way you'll get them confused. Soviet 9mm is shorter and squatter. The US or Luger 9mm is much longer and narrower. But they are both, in fact, 9mm cartridges. So when you say X millimeter, it's just sort of nomenclature. It doesn't really describe the caliber itself.
Behind it.
For example, you could have a 50 caliber Nitro Express, 50 caliber BMG, even a 50 caliber black powder rifle, though that's not really a cartridge.
Ah, so it has a lot more power behind it.
Yes, it has more power behind it, and that's why. Also, the bullet itself is substantially heavier. Even though it's only 1mm bigger in diameter, the bullet itself is longer and heavier.
They should probably mention the girth of the bullet instead of just the length.
The actual cartridge is 9x19mm. I'm trying to remember the exact nomenclature for 9x21, but 9x21 is a cartridge that's used almost exclusively in, like, Italy.
Wouldn't that be better for shooting bears? Because it's longer and more powerful?
Not necessarily. It might be faster, but I don't know. You're getting into, like, stuff that I can't really remember off the top of my head, man.
I mean, it's not just about the exact mathematics and size of the bullets. It's also the game you want to take down. Bears have a thick hide. Is it a bullet-stopping thick hide? Possible. They have a lot of bone structure, and if you have a charging bear, you want to be able to put enough rounds in it that you hit a vital organ and stop them. This can be actually pretty tough to do, right? Especially when you have an animal where a lot of its mass is hide, fur, bone, muscle, and other non-essential for living tissues. So I don't actually know what the math is on bears. It's hard to distinguish between a stereotype, which is big cartridge more dangerous, and just the idea that a bullet is a bullet. There is no biological thing that's like stopping bullets, right? Most commercially available cartridges will not be stopped by any bone or muscle or fat tissue on basically any living thing. Maybe like a whale shot stem to stern. I don't know. But the point is, it wouldn't be ethical to actually run these tests to say, okay, let's have 1,000 bears charge at you, and 500 will make someone shoot at them with a 10mm, and 500 will make someone shoot at with a 9mm, and see which bear drops sooner. I would be morbidly curious to know that test, because I have a sneaking suspicion that caliber is not quite the hyped up be-all end-all that you think it is. But again, you wouldn't ethically be able to do that for obvious reasons.
Mathematics of bullets?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not fully versed in that. But 10mm is actually a good cartridge. It's like a defensive cartridge against bears because of the power it has behind it.
Okay.
This is the 12mm pistol.
Wait, this is the 12.7mm, so that's the 50 cal.
Yeah, this is a 50 cal pistol. To be honest, I don't know why they didn't just put a Desert Eagle in this game.
That looks like a ray gun toy. Probably not by accident. Fallout definitely draws a lot from those like 50s ray gun vibes.
Entirely know what this pistol is supposed to be based off of. It's like, oh my god, that barrel is way too big for a 50 cal. That's like a freaking 20mm barrel.
It almost looks like you're firing grenades from it.
I feel like when you hold onto this gun, you're supposed to get a nice high grip on it.
But you're holding it down to the very bottom of the handle.
I'm holding it down to the bottom of the handle because I don't want to get bit by this weird-looking slide that looks like it came off of a Formula 1 car.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, if I do get a high grip on it, that is definitely going to hit me in the hand, and I can tell you, that probably won't feel good.
Hey, you got gloves on, it'll be fine.
Yeah, this is one of those things that you see. Gun design is not accidental. They are meant to be lean, simple, and effective. And when you have a design that encourages you to put your hand somewhere that there's also a moving part, you run into a problem. That's why most guns will actually have kind of a notch on the back of the grip so that you know that you can't grip any higher than that without having the space between your thumb and finger hit with the slide.
9mm pistol!
That's a much more normal-looking handgun.
This is a very normal-looking handgun.
Stop repeating me!
Indeed it is, because it's based on the Browning High Power. In fact, it's actually incredibly accurate for a Browning High Power.
It's double action too!
No, this one's single action.
No, you don't have to keep on reloading the hammer.
But it's still single action, though. Single action is just refers to hammer movement.
Uh-huh.
If a gun is double action, that means the hammer has to go backwards, which is the first action, and forwards, which is
This is all news to me, by the way.
the second action.
The Army definitely doesn't teach you anything. The Army teaches you the bare minimum you need to know to fire and maintain a firearm.
The hammer's doing that exact thing. It's going forwards and hitting the bullet, and then...
So this hammer is only going forwards, and then the gun fires.
Uh-huh. But then the end position is backwards.
Just think about the steps the hammer has to go through in order for the gun to fire. Don't think about after that.
Oh, okay.
So for a double action gun to fire, the hammer has to go backwards, forwards.
Well, this gun has to go backwards and forwards too, except the backwards motion is already prepped.
What happens after the gun fires is not part of whether the gun is single or double action. Only until the bullet leaves the gun.
So only revolvers can be double action.
No, oh my god.
Oh, is that a problem for you?
No, other handguns can be double action.
But then you have to pull the hammer back.
No, you don't. Pulling the trigger on the gun is pulling the hammer backwards, and then it snaps forward.
So to summarize, this is single action.
This is a single action handgun.
Because you pull the trigger and it goes forward, backward, really fast.
Because it just goes forward, and then the gun fires.
Yes. And
Don't
then it goes,
think about the part of it going backwards.
it goes backwards really fast after it's
Don't
fired.
think about the thing of the hammer going backwards after that. The only
Oh my god. Okay, even I've got it. Like, jeez.
reason the hammer goes backwards is because the slide comes backwards, ejects the shell casing, and cocks the hammer.
How would a double action pistol like this work?
You pull the trigger, the hammer slowly moves backwards, and then once it reaches the break point, the hammer slaps forwards and fires the gun.
So how do triple action revolvers work?
Those are not a thing.
What if there's like a hammer that jiggles around a bit?
Then your handgun probably needs to be serviced.
I guess you could make a triple action if somehow as like a safety mechanism, like you pulled the trigger halfway, it like dropped into a notch, and then you had to like unnotch it and then finish pulling the trigger.
The only downside to the Browning High Power, or at least that I've noticed, is if you get a good like high grip on it, like you're kind of supposed to, sometimes when the hammer comes backwards, it does have a tendency to bite the webbing of your hand. I don't really like that.
That's why you wear gloves. I see you have a small hole in the side of your gun. Is that a safety?
The hole is what holds the firing pin in place. Once you get the firing pin and the spring installed in the slide of the handgun, you drive the roll pin through it, and that's what keeps the firing pin and spring inside the slide of the handgun.
So if you remove that pin, the gun can't fire. So it is kind of a safety.
Yeah, it's a safety in that the gun won't function.
Yeah, this is one of the things, as elegantly as the Browning High Power Colt 1911 are designed, cleaning and taking them apart is a tremendous pain in the butt. It really is annoying, and those tiny pins holding everything together. In the military, we would call pins that hold the whole weapons together Jesus pins, because they're, I don't know, it's some religious joke.
Anymore. It's a safety much in the same way that if you remove the engine of your truck won't work anymore.
I'm putting it in park by taking out the V6.
12.7mm submachine gun.
That's beefy.
So this is the, oh, why am I looking straight? What is happening here? So this is a 12.7mm submachine gun. It's somewhat based on the P90.
So why do you use this all the
Oh yeah, it's got that top load magazine.
time? You love the P90 so much.
I do love the P90, but I don't really care for this gun.
Because it doesn't have the iconic look.
Yeah, kind of. It does have the same top-fed magazine as the P90, But beyond that, it's not really very similar.
I would love to see like a simple diagram of how the P90 works, because my mind cannot still conceive of it, that it rotates the round and drops it in. It just seems like something that would be really unreliable, because there's so many more moving parts to reorient an entire round.
I also find it strange that it's in 50 cal for some reason. I don't fully understand why it's in 50. I mean, it does have a lot of kinetic energy behind it. Also, this sight radius is incredibly short. Having a longer sight radius theoretically increases accuracy, but for some reason, the rear sight is attached to the front of the magazine, and your front sight is right there, which only gives you like 3 inches of sight radius.
Yeah, now that you bring that up, it seems silly. Also, why is it called a radius? Should be called a sight length, right?
I've just always heard it referred to as sight radius.
Radius refers to...
I think it probably refers to the fact that the rear sight and front sight form not a line, but actually a cone of vision along which you are accurate. This is why, of course, if you try to aim with simple iron sights, like on, say, a Mosin, where the sights are pretty big and clunky, anything out past a human-sized target at 100 meters just starts to get hidden behind that front sight post.
Circles.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense in this context.
I don't know why. I don't know why, Mike. I don't know why it is called that. I'm sure there is some reason for it that I don't understand, or maybe there isn't a reason for it, and it's just everybody just keeps parroting that word.
Okay.
Just like stopping power.
Just some nonsense, misconception-based word that people keep repeating over and over. Well, the internet has only made that worse.
Okay. Well, if they find more guns like this, I hope they improve their sight radii.
Yes.
Maybe when they say...
Also, the weird thing is having the front sight or the rear sight post mounted to the magazine means that there's always a chance that every magazine is going to have subtle differences in how it sits, and you're basically depending on every single magazine to get zeroed, which is not really a great way to ensure a consistent sight picture. Admittedly, with a submachine gun, you're not talking about a really precision firearm, but you still want sights that are consistently accurate. You wouldn't want to, you know, that particular magazine may pull to the left. You change it out, it may pull a bit to the right. You change it out, it may be spot on. And if you don't know those things, then your ability to deliver accurate rounds to targets is going to be greatly diminished. And as we've talked about in other videos, making sure you hit the thing you're shooting at and not the things that you aren't shooting at are equally important skills.
Sight radius, they mean the size of the sight's peeping hole.
No, they're referring to how far between the front and rear sight.
Maybe you are, because you're using that term incorrectly.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm dumb as hell. I just have like all this autistic knowledge about guns, and then some of it I don't fully understand. So I apologize.
You came out here to buy all these guns and spew all this gun knowledge out towards me, and now I'm making you have self-doubts.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
As we've discussed in other videos, true experts always know the limits of their knowledge. I don't know, or I'm not familiar with that, or we don't know yet, or I haven't read anything, is the classic sign to me of a true expert, because a true expert not only knows a lot, but they know what they don't know.
Thank you, Mike. Anyway, so this is partially based on the P90. The magazine definitely looks like a P90 magazine, except that it's made of like opaque plastic, and you can't actually see how many rounds are in there.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. But mostly based on the P90. I don't know what this little tab sticking out of the back is. Maybe that's supposed to be like a release mechanism for a stock, or maybe that's the safety, and the safety is literally an on-off switch.
It's, again, hard to understand a parallel universe or how firearms would be designed in another world, because our firearms are, of course, designed for human beings, but also are a reflection of the tradition, right? Because users don't want confusing designs, right? They want sort of familiar designs that are updated. This is why the M4 has basically been, in some familiar fashion, in the hands of shooters and military members since the 60s, right? So that's because you don't really want new things, you want improved things. It's like the old line from Henry Ford: if I gave people what they wanted, they would have made a faster horse.
It could, like a light switch.
Yeah, maybe this thing has a battery-operated safety, which would be real stupid, but it's possible.
Battery-operated safeties?
Yeah.
So the battery has to have juice, otherwise your gun can't fire?
Yeah, basically.
Have you seen many guns like that?
No, there's not really a whole lot of them. Some people tried to make, like, biometric guns,
Uh-huh.
the guns that couldn't fire unless the owner was the one holding the gun. But the problem with those is you generally have to have a battery in it in order for it to work, which usually means that that's the weakest part of the gun, and therefore you can just make the gun fire by
Hot wiring the battery area.
like hot wiring it. Or in one instance, there was a gun that was a biometric gun. You had to have like a little tiny microchip in your hand that would tell the gun that you were allowed to shoot it. But the way they got the gun to not work when the biometrics weren't present was by having a tiny solenoid block the trigger. And then someone figured out that you can literally just hold a magnet to the solenoid and it will allow the gun to fire. So, kind of defeated the whole point. If this was actually...
All right, guys, we are going to pause it there. We are right at 35 minutes, and boy, do we have a lot of firearms ahead of us. So we gotta do this piecemeal. Thanks for joining me. If you guys don't know, I am on Twitch, and I am streaming every day this week. That's right, and I'm doing giveaways. We are giving away Steam gift cards. We're giving away Team Fortress 2 items. I'm playing FPSs. It's a fun time. Twitch.tv/CombatVetPaul. You want to follow, and you want to come join us. Thanks again, guys. And I'll see you over on Twitch.